Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So, Tech Nerding series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's been about 4 days since we talked about Nintendo 64, so you know there's been not one but two new cores released by Robert or FPGA Zoomspas in that time. A lot of big improvements to games that you love to play, and a lot of other features under the hood that we're going to get to talk about today, because this core is shaping up to be so good right now. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But let's take a look at Kirby 64. This was a game that didn't run for a bit, but maybe like last September or October, we got Kirby 64 in the core. It was absolutely amazing to see it, and it was 100% beatable. You could complete it, and we confirmed that earlier last year. But there were still some graphical glitches within Kirby 64 that, while they didn't affect the gameplay, were definitely highly noticeable. So we're going to show you what it looks like now, and then show you what the bug was fixed. But this is the current core as it sits today. You can take a look around. I don't see a single pixel out of place. All of the controls, all of the movement, all of the music, all of the graphics just seem like they're running perfectly. And there was a small core update that fixed a single missing polygon that would show up every once in a while in core. It would be random, and Robert was able to find that, and that did affect Kirby. But the big improvement here is take a look at the bottom of the screen. You're going to see this strip of pixels that should not be drawing onto the actual video. This was an error in how RDP was drawing Kirby 64 to the actual hardware, and it's very obvious here that while it doesn't affect the gameplay, it is not what original hardware should have ever looked like. The good thing is it's been 100% patched up. It was one of the last remaining bugs as far as that visual was concerned, and today if you download the current core, you will be 100% good to go in Kirby. Now do be aware, you guys ask every single time whether or not this is an update all yet. It is not. These are still all manual installation. I'm working on a new setup guide for you guys in the meantime. But if you want to see retests of games we haven't shown in like 6 months or so, leave me a comment down below, because the library of the Nintendo 64 is not as deep as something like the Saturn, so if you want to see something retested, let me know. But as we go through the world of Kirby 64, this is now as good as real hardware in my opinion, and considering my Nintendo 64 is not HDMI modded, I would use the core over playing Kirby 64. Unless I was on a CRT, then honestly it would be a 50-50 mix of which one I would take off the shelf. But if you want to play Kirby today, it just works so amazingly well on the current core implementation. There doesn't seem to be anything in this game that needs to be patched up, so this seems to be one of those games that is near to perfect. Now there might be a pixel out of place that we'll never see, but we'll find out about in the future. But it's definitely improved, and having that pixel strip at the bottom out of the way is awesome. It's not a massive improvement. It doesn't affect the playability of the game in and of itself, but it goes to show what stage the core is at with these bug fixes. Now let's move over to Tonic Trouble as well. This one got some improvements recently with some intro cutscene stuff and other graphical glitches, and I know some people really do love this game. Tell me down below if you had it back in the day, because this is one that I really don't have a ton of experience with as far as nostalgia is concerned. A big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the captures as well this week. He played Tonic Trouble, and I don't think he's a real big fan of it either. I definitely enjoy what it's trying to do though, and I'm sure there's a lot of nostalgia out there for it. But another 3D platformer that just works on the current core. And I did check the playability tracker, and this does seem to be something you can see the credits scroll on, and do be aware that there is a spreadsheet that keeps all of the different information for all of the games, which games are completable, which ones are playable, and which ones are not, and the percentage always grows on stuff like that. There's really nothing that is considered perfect yet, because I'm sure there's still a little bit of stuff to iron out in the background, but the amount of games you can see the credits scroll on MiSTer FPGA today is getting much, much higher. And as we take a look at the world of Tonic Trouble and look at all of the different graphics drawing in, last time we took a look at this game, it was missing like half of the artwork, and it definitely wasn't running at a full frame rate. Now this just seems to be a full recreation of what Tonic Trouble would be like on a real Nintendo 64. And again, it's one of those things. This was a game that was popular back in the day. It just never hit my radar until much later. But it's got a really fun soundtrack, and last time we showed you this game, the sound was definitely flawed. I didn't like listen to it, so give it 40 seconds and I'll be right back with more games that work. It's a fun, quiet soundtrack and has some definite Rayman vibes, although I would say if I had to pick one platformer on the Nintendo 64, Tonic Trouble or Rayman, I would definitely pick Rayman, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. But again, it's another game that you can play just like real hardware and have an awesome time with. Now speaking of real hardware, Blue One has a test core right now that fixes some broken controllers over SNAC or a serial connection. There's some controllers that would work on real hardware that were having issues on MiSTer FPGA, so he has that test core going right now and he is going to see if it can be good enough to get merged into the main core, so stay tuned for that. And also I have that Nintendo 64 controller guide video coming up. Those were shots from that. I'll probably show it to you either this weekend or early next week. And I do have another 2024 controller guide for MiSTer FPGA coming as well, because you guys asked for it. But moving over to VRally 99 here, this is another game that has been improved with recent core updates. It was in the patch notes, and honestly, this is a game that I don't think I've ever actually shown on these testing videos as well. It's just one of those things must have slipped my mind. This is the current core, and take a look at the skybox for the most part. The game is running well, all the polygons are drawing. It is still VRally, so the controls can be touchy, but this looks pretty much like it should on real hardware. But the real thing is what you see in the sky, or what you in fact don't see in the sky right now. That skybox is moving around, everything seems to be drawing perfectly fine. But as we very shortly switch over to a previous core where the bug was, you're going to start seeing something weird happening. Take a look at the sky right here. There's going to be this weird line of red pixels popping in and other graphical corruption in that skybox. This is another RDP bug that Robert FPGA Zoom Spots has now patched out, giving this game a really nice graphical look that is very close to real hardware. Now I'm not 100% familiar with VRally, it's not a game that I've played in forever, so if you see anything, if you're a big fan of this game and you don't think it looks right, leave me a comment down below. And don't forget, if you're not on MiSTer FPGA Discord, we do talk about bugs we find in games while we're testing them, so if you know about something, you should come over and tell people in that channel. It does help the developer understand, especially if you have evidence that it is recreatable. But VRally 99 has definitely improved, and it's one of those games that I apparently just never thought to test in this entire testing series. The Nintendo 64 might have the biggest library in the world, but honestly I can still forget games out of the 200 and change that actually do exist. And if there's another game I've never shown, leave me that comment down below and tell me about it, because I will definitely check it out on one of the upcoming videos. But if you want to play VRally 99 today, it's in much better shape than it was in previous cores. Now speaking of small but really interesting improvements, let's take a look at Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut. I can't say that this is a very good game. I know there's fans for it out there, but honestly it's not my preferred game on Nintendo 64 as fighters are concerned, but it was a very popular game. There's been some slight improvements in the background art, but it was actually the intro that had completely missing graphics down to a function in RDP that was rarely used and may have been outside of the actual guidelines for Nintendo. But in the background here with those eyes, that used to be a little bit of a sore spot. But as we move into a previous core, the Interplay logo in the intro would never draw, and now on the current core that's 100% there. It doesn't affect the gameplay in any way, shape, or form, but you definitely don't want missing graphics, and it is an improvement. And as we actually get into Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut, the game in and of itself, this all seems to be rendering exactly like it would on real hardware. And I do actually like the clay aesthetic. Using clay and doing stop motion animation versus sprites and hand drawing them does work, and the 2D and the 3D works as well. It's just one of those things that seems like the developers never actually spent too much time developing the fighting game engine or the move set for the game, because it definitely plays stilted, a little bit clunky, and I know that the Nintendo 64 doesn't have the deepest fighting game library, but Clay Fighters still definitely is one of those games that just never done it for me. But if you are a fan, leave me a comment down below and tell me why, because I would be very curious. But this is a game that definitely has been featured a lot on the channel because it had a lot of different revisions that fixed different bugs, and it was one of the first games outside of stuff like Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart that was actually running. You could get the sprites on screen, but there would basically be almost no 3D in the background. So it is a great test to see just how much the core has improved from the start to right now, and this intro cutscene as well renders totally fine. I don't see any issues with Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut whatsoever, but if you're a huge fan, tell me down below if you notice anything. Now let's move over to Killer Instinct Gold, because this has also been improved in recent cores. Some of the particle effects on the YUV core update have been fixed, and if the colors seem slightly off on this capture capture. There's actually a capture issue where it came over as HDR and I had to move it over to the Rec 709 color space. I think I nailed it, but tell me down below, because it's one of those games I don't have a photographic memory of, and it's not footage from a camera. But a lot of the particle effects within Killer Instinct Gold had issues, and a lot of that has been completely ironed out. I know this is some people's favorite game on the Nintendo 64. I pretty much constantly get asked for retests of this game every time a new core comes out, but nothing has fundamentally changed too much in like the last month or so. But with some of the updates that have been recently released, all of those particle effects seem to be in much better shape, because sometimes it would just draw as the wrong color, or there would be a little bit of a box around it, but now that seems to be completely cleaned up. And of course, all of the sprites, all of the background 3D, all of the heads-up display graphics, all of the intro character select screen are working like you would expect on real hardware. So that is awesome to see. If there's any problems here with Killer Instinct Gold, I could not notice them when I was watching the captures, but again, if you see something, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. And it is a very fun game. It's not a perfect fighting game, but the mix of 2D and 3D on Nintendo 64 always worked, and this was one of the most popular fighting games on this system back in the 90s and 2000s, so I totally understand why everyone wants to see it retested. But again, if you have other retest requests, leave them down below and I'll try to get to each and every one of them as we move forward. But if you want to play Killer Instinct Gold today, it works. You can play the game from start to finish. You can get 2-player matches in, and pretty much I'd say like 99% of the graphics look totally fine. I feel like I saw a stray pixel there in one of the animations, but it could just be that that's in the original game as well. I'm going to get close to starting some of those real hardware comparisons as the core matures more, maybe spring into summer. But Killer Instinct Gold is working great. And that's the current status of the current core as of the recording of this voiceover. I'm sure we'll be back in 2 or 3 days with more tests and more improvements as well, but we're at the point now with the core that there's a lot of bug fixing going on, but there's still a lot of stuff to be done. Stuff like Jet Force Gemini still isn't running, some games are not running at full speed, and there's definitely still some random crashes on stuff like Conker's Bad Fur Day. Hopefully those all get patched up, maybe in February or March. If you have any questions, leave them down below, but that's your testing video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.